So just coming into the standing position, and I come a bit closer so you can see feet should be hip width apart. You have a little bit of sort of leeway in that, but don't have your feet too close together or too wide apart, and try and keep them in line, as you can see there. So my toes are equal. Sometimes that goes a little bit straight because exactly at the camera angle. Toes pointing forwards, well, they could be slightly turned out, but only slightly. If you're facing the computer screen or some kind of screen, then it's useful to line yourself up. If you can line yourself up with your hips and your shoulders parallel to that. If you're practicing on your own, maybe a wall or a fence or something like that. Your weight should be tending towards the front of your foot, giving you this slight forward motion that is neutralized by a feeling of settling back, just allowing your hips to drop back, softening your knees. Your knees will bend, but don't think of bending your knees, think of dropping your hips back. So you get a feeling of sitting. And then just turning in the center of your body. When we do this, everything above there moves. You may even feel some kind of movement in your legs, particularly as you get more experienced in these arts. Just let the movement build gradually. This posture allows a feeling of our weight beginning to drop, and as that happens, we take away some of the requirement for stiffening, some of the factors that cause us to stiffen up and to tighten. Not all of them, and the tightness doesn't just magically go away, unfortunately. But we gradually learn to rest in this position. That means that big muscles and other tissues in the body just lose some of their tightness and their stiffness. So we start to feel there's a bit more space for movement. So if you were wearing a shirt or a top of some kind that was half a size too small, you would feel restricted when you try to move your arms. You'd be fighting against the clothing or trying not to tear it. Whereas if it was half a size bigger, you'd have plenty of room to move in. And we're going for that half size bigger effect. So as we start to move, there's an ease of movement that leads to the flow. And gradually the movement will fill that space, and as it does that, like water filling a space, it will erode and dissolve, and your range of movement will increase. There's various factors involved in that. The other thing that removing some of that tightness and stiffness in the body does is we find that we're more able to be aware of the different links in the body. If I'm standing here and I'm, say, leaning back slightly and I'm tight in my back there, and when I turn, this becomes a block, and I can't really feel as well as I might do the connection between what's happening in my hips and what's happening in my shoulders. So this basic posture and this exercise are really very important, because this is how I always start my morning practice, and it gives me an opportunity for reflection on my posture. You can start to suddenly realize I'm holding my knees stiff. I soften my knees, the movement becomes easier, and the flow of the movement, the flow of the energy, and things like the rhythm of the movement gradually start to come into my sort of field of view, as it were. The other thing about all these details of the posture, and there are many, many details that I haven't gone into as yet, is that they do serve to focus our attention. And so what that means is that gradually extraneous thoughts sort of begin to withdraw a little bit. We get a bit of space from that ongoing kind of chatter in our heads. It keeps coming back. You might find yourself standing here doing this in your living room or something, a room, and you're looking around and something, oh, I've really got to paint that wall or something like that. This is quite normal, quite natural. And it's just how we are as human beings. And we're not trying to stop that. We're not trying to say, no, I mustn't think of the wall. That's just going to add to the stress. What you want to try and do is just sit back a little bit, say, oh, I don't need to focus on the wall right now. I think about what's happening in my hips. And so gradually, as I said, there's a bit of space, not only in the body, but in the mind as well. And this sense of calmness starts to develop. And it's important to realize, as I said, that that's a transitory state. So one of the key things that we learn to do in Tai Chi, I feel, and for me, one of the great benefits is not so much that I'm always centered, always rooted down with my center of gravity dropping, always calm and so on and so forth, far from it. But we know when we're starting to lose those qualities because we notice from the changing sensations in body and mind. And so we're able to just sit back a little and to come back every now and then to sort of touch base. And there's I think it's a tremendous contribution to our sense of well-being generally. So you don't have to remember at the start lots of complicated exercises. A simple exercise like this can help you to focus on the basic principles. You become familiar with how they work in body and mind. And these are the building blocks of everything else in Tai Chi, whether you're interested in the Tai Chi sequences or the exercises, the solo practices, meditative practices, whether you're interested in developing it as a martial art or whatever, it's the same building blocks. So there's many aspects to Tai Chi. I sometimes think of the whole spectrum of the art as being a bit like a house with several doors and windows and various ways of getting into the house. And so in the first instance, for anybody new, I would always say find the door that's closest to you. Find your way in. Once you're in the house, then you can explore if you wish to. There's different rooms you can go to, different aspects of the art you can explore. But in the first instance, you want to get into the house. Now there's a slight change in this one. Turn your hands palm up, raise them up. And if I stand still, you'll see that my hands are slightly in front of my shoulders there. And as I turn, I haven't moved my arms back. So again, it's the body moving your arms, but your arms are in a fixed position and you want to try and maintain that position without stressing in the arms. So the big muscles of your arms are certainly working, but they shouldn't feel rock hard. You should feel more like a balloon that's been inflated. And then just drop your hands down. Give your legs a little bit of a shake. And everybody in Tai Chi comments on how strong this is in the legs. The change in posture that I talked about is effectively from holding our weight higher up, quite often with knees and hips and ankles quite locked. And as soon as we start to sink down, of course, muscles are starting to engage in a way that they perhaps haven't done for a long time. And you will feel that in your legs in particular. So with your feet parallel and aware of the feeling of your feet sinking into the floor, aware of the pull of gravity through your body, just rock your weight forwards and backwards. This is a movement in your feet and ankles. So don't bend your head forwards or bend from your hips. If I demonstrate with this pole, you imagine the pole in the middle of the body. You see the pole's not bending, but it's rocking on the base of the pole. Now, if the pole goes a long way forwards, it will start to fall, and so will I, and likewise a long way back. So if I to rest this here and do this, this is the kind of movement that you're making. And in theory, it should be possible for me to find a point where the pole will just stay still. In practice, it's very difficult. But if I could get the perfect alignment with the floor, with the pull of gravity, and so on and so forth, the pole will just stay there. But that's how difficult it is. So this is a very simple idea that we can bring ourselves into line with the pull of gravity and be able to stand without, think of it as your skeleton in line with the pull of gravity. So shoulders are in line with the hip, the pelvis is gently tucked under. And when we find that neutral point, we can in theory just stand there and allow gravity to work through our body without the fight. So once again, we reduce a great deal of the need for tightness, for stiffness, and so on and so forth. So what you want to try and do is to gradually let this movement get smaller and smaller until you just feel the possibility of your body coming to rest again, softening your knees and the hips. And so this gives us once again the basic feeling of the posture, which essentially doesn't change. So obviously, when we start to move, then there's a sensation of movement, but this feeling is sort of the background to that movement. Yeah, I'm going to come a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. Now, just letting your hips drop back a little bit more and then pushing up. And again, just see if you can perhaps feel this movement, or imagine this movement working through your skeleton so that obviously tendons and ligaments muscles are going to be working, but it's a push downwards through your feet. The bones of your legs straighten, but don't lock your knees right back, and they're kind of lengthening almost through that middle part of your body where your central skeleton sits. As you become more familiar with this, and those of you who are more familiar with this, then also recognize that the yielding, as we call it, the dropping with the pull of gravity, is the thing that prepares the body, loads the body for the push up. It's like if you want to bounce a ball, you drop the ball down first of all, gravity pulls the ball down, and then it bounces back up. So what we've got is a cycle of movement, a cycle of energy that starts with yielding to the pull of gravity, to allow gravity to pull your hips down, just as you might allow the ball to drop, until you feel the push up, the body expanding and contracting. Excuse me. Now see if you can just get this into a nice steady rhythm. Notice that your hands are moving with you. It's almost got to be the case, hasn't it? Because they're attached to your shoulders. So if anyone was just doing nothing, it's simply allowing your arms to hang by your sides. There's a sense of movement, of energy in your arms and your hands, and we give that a shape. Imagine just cradling a ball, holding the ball against your belly. Hands are quite close to your body. So as you push up and sink down, the ball will move with you. Again, I'll demonstrate that for those of you unfamiliar. If I hold on here, it's a very heavy ball, it's not that heavy, but there, all I'm doing at the moment is this. I'm not trying to lift the ball, I'm just using my body to reinforce this sense of movement upwards, like a wave coming up underneath the body. And then what will happen is you keep your hands in position, but you let that expansive movement push your elbows out, and that draws your hands up. Turn your hands over as though the ball is underneath your hands, and drop your hips and back and pressing down and then pushing up. Nice and smooth. One of the very common images that we use to help program our movements, to help program the body, is that we're moving in water. When we move in water, most of us will quite naturally soften a little bit. So the joints of your fingers, for instance, and your elbows, and maybe the muscles across your shoulders, just begin to lose some of their stiffness, some of their tightness. And so that can be a useful image for some people. Don't chase after the images if they're not appropriate for you at the moment. We use a variety of images. So if one image doesn't work, then so be it, it's fine. And if you've had an image in the past that worked, but somehow it ceases to work, then that's fine too. It's not the image, it's the effect that we're looking for. And sometimes once we've found the effect, we find maybe there's a better image or a deeper image that helps. But now, sinking down, same in legs and hips, turn your hands out, let the movement, push your hands to the side a little bit. Down. If I exaggerate this, once again, you'll see how my elbows go out first, and that draws the fingers up, then my elbows drop down below my hands and shoulders. That was exaggerated very much. This is sort of, sometimes I do the movements bigger so that you can see in part what I'm trying to feel. And then a third variation is to cross your hands over. And again, elbows leading your fingers around, like you're painting a circle on a wall with your fingers. So once again, your body is moving your arms are moving your fingers, not the other way around. And just bear in mind that can switch very easily. We can get almost too focused on the arms and the hands. And then again, staying the same in legs and hips. This time, focus on the expansion on one side. Again, your elbow being pushed out. This time, the intent is to have your hand go straight up. This is an exercise called Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. The East Asian dragon is a different looking creature to the one in the West. It's much more snake-like, it's much more slender. We're coming up to the beginning of the year of the dragon, so there should be no shortage of those images around for people to have a look at. So there's this kind of long fluid feeling through the side of the body. And at the top of the movement, it's like you're plucking something off a tree. And say a soft fruit, just wrap your fingers around, rotate from your shoulder all the way down. The dragon plucks the stars. So this one movement of pushing up and sinking down gives us a number of options for expression through the upper part of our body and our arms and our hands. We'll do one more round of this. And then what we're going to do after this one is go back to the first of them, and we'll do them in a little sequence. So take your time, let your hand drop down, try not to rush the change over. So this is called rooting down, and it's lifting the ball and pressing down. Let your hands come down in front of your belly. Turn your hands out, going into the wild goose with this image of the bird in flight. And then let your hands drop down again, circling around. So you're painting a circle in the room with an expansive feeling within your body, parallel to the feeling we might get when the sun comes out. And then finally, let your hands drop all the way down, and one on each side, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So just follow as best you can. And as you get familiar with the sequence, just try and get a sense for what happens at the point of change. Don't rush that. But this is where we often find examples of how body and mind begin to interact together. Combination of memory of the movements, of the different images that we use, of being able to see the change in the film. So we begin to appreciate the interaction of mind and body at that point. I'm not saying that one is anything more important than another. Tai Chi works very much in an area where I feel body and mind overlap. It's not mind over matter, but rather what happens when our attention and our intention begin to be focused. Again, there's that sense of attention coming inwards, and the effect that that has on our physical movements and our posture, and on what's happening within the body, the patterns of movement within the body. Let's do one more round of this little set. Let the hand come down with the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. Just stand for a moment, noticing how this posture feels for you now. Give your legs a shake. So sometimes it can feel worse. That, there aren't any guarantees here. So what we had happening there was this bouncing dynamic that I described, which is one of the most important sources of energy for the movement that we work within in Tai Chi. Not all the movements involve an active sinking down and pushing up with the hips. You could describe what we've just been doing as though you're in water again, and you drop down into the water, and then the buoyancy of the water pushes you up. In this couple of exercises, we simply maintain this posture. So we don't go up and down, but nor do we stiffen up. So it's a bit like going to the analogy of water again, if that's a useful one to you. We can drop down and push up, or we can find a way of floating on the surface of the water and just be held there. And when we do that in this posture, it means we're allowing gravity to flow downwards, and we're allowing that response from the body, that energy coming up, free passage. So there is still that sense of movement within the body. There's other forms of movement, other forms of energetic response as well, of course. But for the next two exercises, just try and keep that feeling of sitting. And to start off with, just taking that movement and doing two movements in sequence. Again, your hands coming up, this time coming a little bit above your head, palm up as much as possible, but don't strain in your wrist for that. And you can see here that my hands are slightly in front of my body. And then your hands come back down, all the way down to the starting position. And as they start to come up again, this time you drop your elbows down and push out. And again, you can see my hand is slightly in front of the body, not a long way in front of the body, just enough that I don't feel that I'm pulling on my chest. So alternating those movements, pushing up, feeling the lengthening through your back and spine, a little bit, hips sinking down, remember, and down. And then pushing out. And back. Pushing up. And down. And pushing out. And back. Then just trying to feel a nice steady rhythm. Your upper body expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting. And this time, adding two more movements in from that horizontal position. So with your arms pushing out to the sides, then just turn a little bit in your hips, hands stay in position, but your whole body turns and you come back. And then in the other direction, then your small movement in your hips and back. And then finish with the push out to the side. So 4 directions. It's called 4-way push. Or push in 4 directions. Take your time. So 1. Once again, don't rush the change over. Bring your hands back. There's just a little moment here of settling back into your posture before you begin again. You can also maybe just feel that moment at the end of the extension. But most people, I think, find it more obvious here at the end of the contraction stage. Think of it as being like a comma in a sentence. Not that everything drains to a halt, but it just sort of structures the movement a little bit and reminds us that we want a sense of stillness in our attention. We don't want to get too frantic about what's coming next. Very easy to think, oh, I've got to do the next movement. But again, just follow the hands down. If you forget what the next movement is, it's not the end of the world. And if you're new to this, just realize that that will happen. Happens to everybody, regardless of their experience. So pushing in 4 directions. Try not to stiffen up in your shoulders and your arms. It's quite difficult on the upward movement. But maybe you can feel it more easily as you push your arms out. Your elbows are hanging down. And this is where we can begin to develop the internal feel of the movement, because we start to get glimpses of how it might feel when we can do this without the tightness, without the stiffness. Some moves will lend themselves more easily to that. And so, say for instance, if we're stiffening up in our shoulders as we push up, we have a sense of how it can feel when the shoulders aren't stiff or when our back is more open. And then what we can do is we can we can instruct the body to maintain that. This is what intention does. It gives instructions to our body. And quite often we find that our bodies are quite responsive to those instructions without us having to think about everything directly. So the influence of our mind, in a very broad sense of the term, gradually grows and is cultivated. Now, let your arms hang down again. Hips still sinking down. And then the expansion pushes one arm out to the side. Elbow is bent. And your arm extends a little bit and swings up again a little bit in front of your body. And then straight down the center. So, similar in some ways to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. But just that little bit of an expansion sideways as well. So this is quite a strong feeling of movement. You can get quite a strong pull in your back and your shoulder. So bear that in mind. And if it's comfortable for you, just add a turn. Try not to tighten up completely. However far we move, we want to feel we could have moved a little bit further, that we've maintained that feeling of space for movement within the body, for the flow of the energy, the flow of the blood, and so on. And then change sides. Notice any difference between one side and another, which there often is. And then, if it's comfortable, with the turn. And once again, just excellent. So all those first movements were done always in the upright position. Most of what we would do will be in that upright position. The next two movements are slightly different. Once again, I'm going to demonstrate this with the pole. So when I'm standing like this, I've got that sense of alignment there. Now, if I simply lean forwards and take myself away from the center line, eventually I'm going to fall forwards. So if I bend my back like this, I could fall forward. So what we're about to do, what I'm about to show, is not a back bend. What I'm going to do is I push my hips back. And you can see my hips have gone back. My head has gone forwards, coincidentally. Then what I do is I let my hips drop down. I let gravity pull my hips down, coming back to that alignment, and then I push up. So we have this movement. Be very careful, very gentle with your knees and your hips. So it's 1, and then 2, and then 3. With the pole. Again, on the side. 1. I'm doing this quite big so you can see what I'm doing. It's not an invitation to move this far. 2, and three. So again, a lot of focus of attention on that central part of the body. This time, as you push up, let the movement move your arms. This is a movement called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. The shoulders go forwards, drawing your arms over, drop down, again aware of the weight of your arms as you come back to the upright position. Just be aware of what's happening in your back. It isn't the case that we necessarily get more from big movements. Again, it's important not to hurt yourself. And one of the key things with this and the next exercise is how we come up, not by straining in the shoulders or neck, pulling our head up, but by sitting back. So you're sitting into a chair. And then hands resting in front of you, turn horizontally in the center and then push your hips back, swing your hips around the other side, drawing your hands around in the smooth circle. This is called polishing the table. If the idea of housework doesn't appeal to you, which often doesn't, imagine there's a big ball there and you're rolling the ball around in one direction and then in the other. One more time for polishing the table. And stand again. This time, just trying to retain that focus of attention on the center part of your body. Give your legs a shake. So this way of coming to the upright is very important in Tai Chi, and it's very different to how we would normally bring ourselves upright. It enables us to be upright again without the same level of strain. And we call it sitting. Let me just demonstrate something. Yes. If I go to sit in the chair, I push my hips back, I drop into the chair, and then I can just drop back in the chair. And this actually, you can see my hips drop back, my pelvis levels off, and I can even sit back in the chair if I wanted to. I'm not going to, but I could come to the upright position rather than straining here to lift my head. So the posture offers us the potential to become aware of these movements within the body. You can think of it as the flow of energy. You can think of it as just the rhythm, the momentum of the movement. There's all sorts of energetic reactions within the body and a lot of different movements. Most, if not all, of the metabolic processes need some sort of space for movement. So the basic posture really encourages all of that and allows all of that. So it's something that we practice extensively in Tai Chi. We're always coming back. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be standing or indeed sitting for a few moments like this, just to remind yourself that effectively we don't have to fight gravity simply to remain upright. Now we're going to change the posture, keeping the width of our step. Turn one foot out, and this is an angle you can play about with, but the front foot, when you step forward, points straight ahead, not like this at the moment. And we keep the width of the step from left to right. So it's almost like there's a square here, and my feet are on the opposite corners, the diagonal corners of the square. We could do it like this, but it's always going to be a bit more difficult. So we go to here, and once again, we get that feeling of our center of gravity dropping. Imagine your pelvis hanging from the spine, like a bucket in a well hangs from a rope. And then just beginning to use your feet to push yourself forwards and backwards, giving yourself a moment as you arrive on each leg to settle. So again, we have that comma in the sentence, not this, and it just gives us a chance to complete the movement. Quite often we're very busy, we have very busy lives, we're used to multitasking, we're trying to do several things at once. Tai Chi encourages that calmness of attention through focusing on one thing. So it's like you're just carrying your posture forwards and backwards. The hips are still sinking back. Trying to notice if you are perhaps leaning forwards or backwards. It's quite common. Again, if I show you with this, more or less the right position. As I move forwards and backwards, I'm trying to keep my alignment with that imaginary line through the body. There are no straight lines in the body, so I'm not trying to imply that your body's completely straight upright or that your spine is completely straight. It shouldn't be. There are natural curves in our body. We're not trying to work against those by any means. At the moment, you'll be getting maybe about 60% of your weight in the front leg. In the back leg, because the foot is turned out and the hip is more open, maybe up to 70. But the key thing is to feel the movement, the flow of the movement. We sometimes refer to this as filling and emptying. So if I take this water bottle and I just tilt it so that the water flows to the other end, and then it flows to the bottom. And if I could find a way of pumping the water up to the top of the bottle, enough of the water gets up there and it will move. And then if I could pump the water back up, it will move back. So we've got a movement that complements and works with that sense of the bounce that I talked about earlier. You feel the push from the back leg or from the front leg, and it's like you've sunk down and it's trying to push you up. But your intention, and again, this is where our mind comes in, is to go forwards. You wait until you feel the push, and the instruction to the body is move the weight back. And that intention doesn't have to be a thought. It doesn't have to be that long-winded. It could just be a memory of filling and emptying. And in fact, thoughts are relatively slow compared to our responses quite often to external stimulus, as in Pavlov's dogs, or indeed to a memory. If you were looking through some photographs and you suddenly came across an old photograph of you with some friends or something like that, you'll probably smile before you registered intellectually that, oh yes, that's so and so, or whatever. So thinking is part of the process, but it's not the whole of the process. Now, as you sink into your back foot this time, just let your front toes come up a little bit. More of your weight goes back. Now you can turn that front foot out slightly. Go forwards, settle into the front, push the back knee forwards so your heel comes out. So up until now, we've been looking for that alignment with the pull of gravity, the subsequent dropping of our center of gravity, the rooting down on between two legs. Now we're moving towards finding the same alignment over one leg. It's obviously going to be more difficult. Any kind of poor alignment, if the pelvis is slightly tilted or whatever, will become immediately apparent, especially now, because at this point, you bring your back foot in, and then you push it back and out to the same position, put the ball of the foot down, lower your heel, move your weight back. And the same thing here, except that when you step forwards, your heel goes down. Again, people with a bit more experience, remember, we want to just try a gentle pressure to the foot, as though we're walking on soft sand. You just press in gently to find the firmer sand below the surface. Now try that on the other side, so get your posture, hip width across your feet. About the same in length. Remember, you're trying to move your weight. This is not meant to be a huge stride. And then just feeling that dynamic of filling and emptying from one foot to another. 60% in your front leg. And then when you go back, 70% in your back. So this is not like everyday walking, but it's something that feeds into our everyday walking. In particular, that feeling of your hips dropping back, your pelvis dropping, keeping you stable. The lower your center of gravity, the more stable you're going to be. And effectively, we allow that to happen by not straining against the pull of gravity. Beginning to raise toes and heel. And again, after a while, particularly people with more experience, remember, this involves our hips. The feeling of releasing and dropping through our hips isn't necessarily the case that the knee will bend more. And then stepping in. You don't have to raise the leg. You can just put your toes down. If you do try to raise your leg, make sure that as you bring your knee up, you're not leaning over. And then wherever you happen to find the space, and you're either forwards or backwards, or maybe even just diagonally, take a few steps through. I'm going to go straight forwards. And then go back the other way. Good. So again, we generate movement, momentum, energy through essentially the initial thing is always going to be yielding, dropping with the pull of gravity, and then taking the response of our body. And we begin to shape it. We shape it, we've already discovered that the turning in the center of the body determines where our hands go. So this becomes a strong point of focus. And we're going to do 2 exercises using that energy, using that movement. The first, there's no particular turning, but the first will just be this. Now this is fisherman castanet. If you just watch for a moment, notice my hand is being pulled through, it drops down and swings up. I'm not trying to lift my hand, I'm just allowing it to swing, just as we did earlier with this movement. Nice and soft in the shoulders. And then when we've done a few of these, when you get forwards, instead of just going straight back, we're going to rest on the front leg and turn, and that will send our hand out sideways a little bit. And then going back, the same thing on the other side. This is called wind blows the willows. So the first exercise is fisherman castanet. Have your right foot forwards and just getting the weight moving, generating the energy. Move your arms through that. Nice and smooth. Remember again, if it helps, the image of moving through water. Then next time you come forwards, as you settle into your front leg, you turn. This is wind blows the willows. Willow trees are an important image in Tai Chi. You turn the other way as you go back. The branches of the willow tree are nice and supple and they sort of shimmer in the wind. A lovely image. But the reason that the willow is like that, tributary reason, is its deep roots. It can have the supple wood, it will bend in the wind but not break. How it's why it's regarded with in Tai Chi with great interest. Rooting down is the key that enables us to move smoothly and fluidly. Expanding, contracting, or if you prefer yang, yin. Good and shake out. Now, have your left foot forwards. Do the same things again. So starting off with a nice simple movement, fisherman cast net. Just enjoy this sense of the wave-like movement through your body. Notice where you feel movement within your body, your chest, your shoulders, your back, sides. And then you come forwards, and as you settle into your front leg, you turn. Wind blows the wind. So we're going to combine this with the stepping. So you can again go in any direction. I'm going to go forwards. I'll turn my front foot out a little bit. This time as I turn, again, I bend my back knee. I bring my foot in and I step forwards. Same thing here. Hips dropping back, remember. And if you're comfortable with this, then you can take it a stage further. But if you're rather not, that's fine, because you can just raise your leg. This is called dragonfly skims the water. And stand. One more time. And dragonfly skims. Give your legs a shake. Now, use any aching muscles, rubbing your hands together. And tap in your face. Go over your head. Down to one shoulder. Just try and soften in those muscles that are being struck so that you can feel a sense of vibration within your body, almost like you are hitting a drum. The other side. Push your back. around your hips. Your legs, remember, soften as much as you can in those muscles. And then light on your belly and onto the upper part of the chest. So coming back to the standing parallel position, and the last exercise returns to that idea of coming back. It's called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. You sink down, pushing up, just aware of the pull of gravity on your body, or where the tipping point is, where gravity takes over and starts to draw your hands in and you sink down. So, the hands come up and around about here, just relaxing your shoulders, let your hands come around as though they're holding the ball here, elbows dropping down and sinking down. And again, just try and have a sense of what it is that brings you back to this quieter, more aligned, more stable, spacious position. It could be the image of the mountain, it could be the sensations of movement within your body. Just be the memory of what it's like to settle. And just find what the actual trigger is. What would you like to be able to do the next time you're feeling a little bit uptight and stressed about something? One more time. And stand. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. Check out. Thank you very much for watching and joining in. And everybody, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. Bye for now.